This conference will now be
This
recorded.
is about how many people are using these technologies frequently.
Right. So if you see the framework, right? .NET is the framework. Okay, you need to understand the concept wherein .NET is a framework. Okay, and this particular framework, um, let's say you play cricket. Okay, so you all know cricket,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes,
Okay, great. So where do you play the cricket? So do you play in streets, somewhere in the streets? No, right? When if it is a professional, uh, play, professional people play, it would be on the ground, right? So ground is where collectively people or the professionals play the cricket, right? They have everything. I mean the setup like the stamps, bails, pitch, and then umpire, and then there is some live relay that we all see, right? So that's how the entire stadium would again have seating and seating capacity, and people go there, visit, book the tickets, go there, visit during the play timings, and then enjoy the cricket, right? So in the similar way, these are all the numerous frameworks that we have. Okay, within those, .NET is the most prominent framework that is being used, and this is the latest survey, somewhere around 2022. Okay, so where I have seen like .NET is the prominent framework which is being used by the developers. So now, why it is being used by the developers? That should be the next question. So why it is prominent? Because it supports almost 20 different languages. Okay, within those 20 different languages which this framework supports, right, or the platform supports, so C sharp is a pet for it, right? When I say pet, C sharp, ASP, and Visual Basic, these are something developed by Windows or Microsoft. Rather, Windows, I would say Microsoft, right? Microsoft is the company behind this. So, .NET framework, C sharp, ASP.NET, and then the Visual Basic .NET, VB.NET. These are all something developed by Microsoft itself. Clear on this part? So now, when we try to come up with our test automation, right? So when we try to come up with our test automation, why it is C sharp Selenium is the question, right? So again, there is something like the number of applications that run on the .NET, right? There would be numerous applications that run on the .NET. Do you want to see them? Some of them. Okay, I would be able to show some of them which are listed. Okay, let me open it for you people. So there are many companies which are associated with .NET, right? Microsoft .NET platforms. So what they do, see Accenture, Microsoft itself uses .NET platform. Starbucks, they use, I mean their application, right? Starbucks application, it uses .NET platform. Stack Overflow, it uses. So in the similar way, UiPath, right? All these tools or the applications, some of the listed ones are these. So these all run on .NET platform. Okay, clear on this part? These were
yes.
developed. I mean, the application is developed and it is running on the .NET platform. Okay, so now when we have more applications running on the platform, so we intend to incline towards the languages and the framework that on which the application is being developed. Clear on this part? So now there could be Java, there could be Python, there could be Ruby, there could be JavaScript, right? Let me show you something. some interesting thing from the Selenium perspective. Okay, so if you see here, let me share. Visible to everyone, a PDF. When it comes to Selenium as well, it's the similar thing. So where Selenium is the highest, percentage of the tools that are being used for the test automation. There are numerous other tools like Ketlon Studio, UFT. So have you heard about these tools? Test Studio, Test Complete, Robot Framework,
Yes, sir.
right? So all of these are some or the other way the automation tools that are there in the market. And initially when Selenium is not introduced into the market, and when there are no other tools, maybe the robot framework, Test Complete, right, Cucumber, APM, Apache, Jmeter, Test Studio, Tosca, these are not nowhere there in the market in the early 2000s, or somewhere down in early 1800 and 1900, right? So what was the tool? So at that time the market was highly dependent on UFT. It's not UFT actually. So when it was introduced by Micro Focus, it is QTP, okay, Quick Test Professional. And later on, that has been the evaluation takes place, right? For every tool, there would be some certain evaluation. So even for Selenium, we have certain evaluation, right? So we would try to understand that evaluation, how this Selenium came into picture, what made this Selenium to come into picture, and what kind of components we have within Selenium. We would try to understand that today. Okay, so just to make you understand that Selenium is one of the highly prominent automation tools. Nowadays, there is one more tool which is very much prominent, similar to Selenium, and most of the projects at times they tend to incline and migrate their scripts from Selenium to that particular tool. Any idea on it?
Is it
What
SpecFlow?
tool it is? Sorry?
SpecFlow, is it?
No, not SpecFlow. SpecFlow is again a framework, right? So the
Okay.
test framework, it
Is
comes
it
with,
playwright?
yeah, correct. Who is this?
Kavita.
Kavita. Yeah, good. So that is, there is another prominent tool in the market nowadays which is challenging Selenium till somewhere around 2000, probably 2020. So there is no major challenge in the market for Selenium. So Selenium has that 84% of people have been using Selenium, be it from the Java or be it from the C Sharp, right? But they use that Selenium packages and the components in order to automate, right? So when I talked about QTP, so initially it was QTP, and Micro Focus, they have sold it to HP, and then they started calling it as HP QTP, and that was the prominent, very prominent tool. Even now, certain banking applications and the banking companies, they use this UFT. Okay, that's where we say it is of about 15%, right? Probably they might, the banking applications or any other secured applications, some of the applications, they run still on UFT with Visual Basic or any other language. Okay, because .NET again supports various languages, right? So now, what is that? Over 100 automation tools are available in the market. Now, how do you select a tool? Be it a Selenium, be it Catalan Studio. I'm not just telling you about Selenium here. So I'm telling that you have 100 tools in the market. Then how do you come to a conclusion on selecting the tool? Any guess? How
Depending
we would
on
select
the
it?
test strategy and test
Hmm.
coverage.
Okay.
And budget also, because some tools QTP is
Right.
paid, you know.
Right. QTP or the UFT, Test Complete, Tosca, these are paid versions, right? They charge heftily for licensing. So that's where Selenium was prominent, right? Because this Selenium, when it came in early 2000s, nobody knows that this would be, such a huge wave in the market at the test automation level, right? You can see here. So this is the Selenium evolution, right? So initially they started with Selenium core. Okay, what is this core? This Selenium core is just a JavaScript test runner. It's just a plugin. Okay, so do you people have any idea on plugins? Any kind of plugins? Have you ever used any plugins on the browser?
Yes, there are some plugins like Selector Hub to
Like
run
compiler
Ah,
unit.
plugin,
right, right. So correct. Selector hub. Somebody said selectors hub. That's used for
compiler plugin,
identification of. Sorry, come again.
compiler plugin,
Yeah, compiler plugin. Right. So there are lots of plugins that developers usually come up with for any of the browsers, be it Firefox, be it Safari, be it Microsoft Edge, or be it Chrome, right? So the developers come up with lots of plugins and add-ins. So what are those? We simply just add that onto the browser. So if you see my browser, probably you might also understand what I am talking about, right? Let me share it. So let me share the browser. So now
So can
within this browser, you can see here the extensions, right? There could be manage extensions where you can search for those installables. See, I have Crowpath. This is one which I have not enabled it. I disabled it, right? In the same way, Ranorex. This is one more extension that I have installed. So there are lots of plugins or extensions that developers would come up with to ease our day-to-day activities, right? So we can use those plugins, installables that interact only at the browser level, right? These are the installables that only work at the browser level. Clear on this part?
yes,
Clear? These are the extensions or the plugins or the add-ins that we keep search for and then add them for making our day-to-day life easier. So Crowpath, again, it helps me to identify the XPaths. Okay, we will talk about it, what these XPaths are in the further sessions. Just to understand that these are some software extensions for the browsers, specific to the browsers. Again, developers come up with these kind of tools, right? So this is how it works. So now, when it comes to Selenium, initially this JavaScript test runner is nothing but a small extension. Okay, and it was developed only to work on Firefox. Okay, so why they have come up with this? Why they have come up with this? Because they wanted to save the efforts by automating the testing process, which is being repetitive. Okay, so somebody like, I mean, Jason Huggins, an engineer, right? So he started testing the application manually, and somehow he thought it is very difficult to execute each and every test case or the verify the each and every functionality just by manually doing it. It takes lots of pain, lots of effort. So what he thought, okay, let's come up with some script, a JavaScript, a basic JavaScript, which would enable me to plug and play. I mean, you record that and then you keep playing it. Okay, that's how the Selenium core came into picture. So when this Selenium core came into picture, so later the evolution happened in such a way that people stopped using this JavaScript test runner. They don't need it, right? So as it kept evolved, so there are lots of, because this is again open source, right? So what is open source? Open source means
Free
which are
versions
free
are
to use, right? Nobody charge for it. It is free to use, open to use. You just need to install or download those packages, and then you can utilize them in your project, right? Those are called open source. So this is an open source tool. So what happened then? They came up with WebDriver, Selenium WebDriver. Okay, and around 2006 they came up with Selenium WebDriver, and now this WebDriver is very prominent. Even now we use this Selenium WebDriver, right? People call it as WebDriver, correct? So we would see why it is called WebDriver and how it has evolved into Selenium 2.0 or 2.0, Selenium 3.0, and then now it comes with Selenium 4.0, right? If I'm not wrong, it comes with Selenium 4.0, probably some 2021 onwards. So we started the new version, that is Selenium 4.0, right? So who are doing this? Who are, how are they evolving this tool? So who are doing this? It's an open source, right? So it is an open source community. They have a large community. Selenium has a very large community. That is in turn is one of the prominent reasons for the success of Selenium, right? So they have a very huge open community where many developers, most of the developers or the test automation developers, so they work on Selenium. They keep adding some packages, they keep modifying the inbuilt methods, they keep coming up with some new mechanisms, right? So that's how it's kept on evolving. Okay, so there is a very good huge open source community, so which supports or stands beside Selenium, right? It is nothing but we all of us, because we use Selenium and we started using it, and now we are just like addicted to it probably. So that's where people just tend to just simply use Selenium and then automate, right? That's how they used to um, automate it. So 10 years before it was UFT, right, which was very prominent, and then that's been beaten and replaced by Selenium in the recent trend. So there is Playwright as well. Some of the companies and some of the projects, they tend to incline to Playwright as well. Okay, and who has come up with Playwright again? Selenium is ThoughtWorks. Have you ever heard about ThoughtWorks company?
no.
Yes, HP
Yeah.
ThoughtWorks.
Hmm. Yeah, ThoughtWorks. So who has come up with Playwright? Who started developing it?
Microsoft.
Microsoft, correct. So they have come up with their own prominent setup where there are certain, see, every tool has its advantages and certain disadvantages, right? Now, what Microsoft did is Selenium is the best tool in the market. So let's target this Selenium, right? Now, Selenium has 84% of the usage. So let's target it. So, what are the challenges that usually people face with the Selenium? So, they targeted to provide certain solutions to it in Playwright. So, that's where people again, it triggered that trend of migrating your Selenium scripts to Playwright. So some of them, they they are inclined to use Playwright as well. Okay, but it is very minimal right now because they do not have such big or huge open source community, right? So it all depends on the time frame in which this tool was introduced, because of which most of the companies, most of the resources, most of the people, they started using Selenium. Now once they started using it, it would be a bit difficult even to migrate them, right? Migrate the project from one tool to the other tool. And also it would be a bit difficult to find resources as well, right? Who has that capability, that technical capability, right? So for Selenium, most of the people, they have the understanding. So even developers come up with certain understanding on the Selenium, what package it is, what methods it has, right? So even the core developers also would be able to understand it because it's there from long time, right? It's been 24 years already into the market, right? So now somebody said how we actually select the tool and the language. So somebody said about test strategy. Somebody said about the costs involved in it, right? All these are true, right? All these parameters play a vital role for us to select our tool. Okay, be it Selenium or UFT. So certain times we might see Selenium is a cost-effective tool, but there could be a requirement from the client itself. Client would say, no, I don't allow the open source tools to be used. So you have to use a licensed version. Then you would try to select between UFT, test complete, and then Tosca, right? That's how uh, you bring in your approach to select the tool, right? So there is one more strategy which also might help you in coming up with your entire end-to-end test automation, right? Or the approach. Rather than strategy, I would call it as an approach. Let's talk about it a while and then again get back to this Selenium part. Okay, it would be very interesting. Are you able to see it?
So
Able to see it, right?
yeah, can you
So
please
what,
maximize the browser, like
are
maximize
you
the
only
size,
seeing the browser?
the browser and the picture, if you can maximize it.
Okay, just let me reshare it one more time. Able to see it?
Yeah, it is almost same. Yeah, I think I will use the second screen. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay, okay. Because I zoomed it to 14%. I'm not sure if everybody is able to clearly see it or not.
Yeah, we can see, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. So what is this? So what is this piece? Just below this manual test, you have some object, right? So what is this object? A triangle? It resembles a triangle.
It is 80-20 Pareto chart
Hmm.
and unit integration,
Hmm.
acceptance testing.
Right. No, I'm just
Automation.
talking. I'm just asking about the picture. So
Pyramid.
it's a pyramid
Automation.
or it is in a triangle shape, right? I'm just asking about the shape. Manual test at the top, that's fine. But just below that, it's a triangle, right? Or a pyramid, you can say, right? So what this actually depicts. So when you try to, uh, what is that? Go up the ladder, right? In a pyramid or a triangle. So right from the bottom, if you see, so your layers, right? The layers of tests. So you can see here the layers of tests. So what are those? The base is the unit test or the component test, right? Base has unit test or the component test, and just above that you have API tests, right? API layer. So you would have your integration tests or the API tests, and then comes the GUI test, right? So from down, if you see what this would tell you is you need to have more unit tests, right? Rather than having API tests or the GUI tests, right? Compared to GUI and acceptance tests or the API tests, we need to have more component level testing, unit tests. So who is responsible to come up with the unit tests? Most of the
Developers.
cases, developers, correct. So most of the cases, developers are the ones who come up with the unit test cases. So maybe a bit, relaxed for us, because we don't need to worry about this, right? Most of the time, automation testers. At times, automation testers also involve in coming up with the unit test cases, but this is whole and soul owned by developers, because they come up with the development of the components. So they have to come up with the unit tests, run them, execute them, then share the results for us. So for us, what is the primary major focus that we need to have is on API tests and the GUI tests. Within that again, so this approach suggests to have more number of API tests, right? And then a bit less number of tests compared to the API tests, and they have placed it at the top. So even this area wise, if you see, the GUI test has very less space, right? And acceptance or the API tests, they are little uh, bigger compared to the GUI tests, area wise as well, right? In this triangle or the pyramid. So this test pyramid approach would help you also to strategize your test automation, right? And as well as what they say, again, very less GUI tests. So when they say less GUI tests, it doesn't mean that we don't test the application, or it doesn't mean that you need to provide very less coverage, right? So how the strategy would be is something which we will discuss now. Okay, let me open the whiteboard. Able to see the whiteboard? Yes,
Yes,
no?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So okay, let me go with this. Okay, so what they said is prominently more API tests, and comparative to the API tests, less UI tests, right? So now you can have numerous strategies in and around this approach. So you might focus primarily on API tests, right? Application user interface, I mean application programming interface tests, right? So I would show you what this API is in live in an application. From the browser itself we would be able to see that as well. Okay, so now what is this API test? So these API tests can be your error code validations, and as well as request and response validations. We have discussed about this yesterday, right? So API takes the request from the UI and then sends it to the server and gets the response back from the server, collects the response, and then it give it back to the UI such that UI would display it, right? So that's the flow. If you remember yesterday we have discussed about it. So now, so what is this? You might test the error codes. So we would see what these are, like error 200, error 400, error 500. Have you ever faced these kind of in your application? Error 500?
That is the internal
503?
server.
Yeah, internal server error. Have you faced this? So
Yes.
what are these error codes? So for every API method, so you would have all these standard error codes. Okay. As we talk in terms of internet, because our protocol is HTTP protocol, right? HTTP or HTTPS. That means our communication, our talking to the systems, different systems, is via internet, right? Internet or intranet. Okay. So we communicate through internet, let's say. So wherein in case if you have some issue at the server, those all would range at 500. Okay, 500 range is for server errors. So from the UI, you are trying to send the request. API collected the details. It has triggered the request to the server, but server is not available, right? Then the range between this 500 to 600, I mean 599, those fall under server errors. So they say there will be numerous server errors. So all of them, they have standardized it to 500 codes, right? In the same way, if the data that you are sending, let's say your request has to be sent with uh, three items. What are those? Source, destination, just yesterday's example. So wherein we discussed about searching for the flights. So what are the details that are required? What data is required to search the flight? You need to select the source, destination, and data. Sorry, date, right? And then you would search for the services, correct? So now, if your request has to give the server uh, these field values like source, destination, and the date of travel, but it is not sending all those three before it is triggering the API triggering the request to the server. Somewhere it is missing the source. Okay, you are sending it from the UI, but API has some error, some issue, and it is not able to send one of the fields. Okay, because these three are mandatorily required in order to search and provide the services that are available, right? Now something is missing, be it from the UI end, you are not able to send it, okay, or from the API end, API itself is not properly sending the request, you would get 400, right? So all these client level errors are 400 errors, okay, and then 200 is for success, right? So all 200, 201, 202 till 299, if there are any error codes in the in the API standardization, so all those fall under success. That means you have sent a right request and a right response also has received by the API, right? So then you would get 200 message, okay, 200 error code. So now this is about the APIs, okay. So more API tests they said. So in that case, so one is your error code validation, like whether you would create your test data in such a fashion that certain requests would be successful and you already know what to expect, right? So I am sending a valid request, then it has to be 200, right? And if I am sending an invalid request by missing any values out of those three, I need to get 400. So these all will be documented by the developers itself, which error code we need to receive and what kind of error message we need to receive along with the error code. These are documented and developed by the developers. Clear till this part? Any questions? Clear, no? Regarding the API test. So what the pyramid approach states is to have more API tests, okay, and then less UI tests. So what is the pain point in the UI? why they are suggesting less UI tests, why we need to strategize in such a way to have minimal UI test coverage. When I say test coverage, it's not actually about the functionality coverage. I am talking about less number of UI tests. Okay, your coverage can be more, but you need to focus to have less number of test cases, right? Why? Because UI is the front end where all the users would be interacting, right? It can be any website. Okay, so based upon the changes that keep on coming in at the UI, so I mean, it would be difficult for any of the testers, automation testers specifically, to maintain the scripts. Okay, so we would see what is this maintenance, why this maintenance is high here, and what kind of efforts that are need to be put into UI tests. Okay, before going to that, let's again deep dive what Selenium does, how it would interact with the UI, right? When I say UI, it could be any website, any web page, web application, right? Let me share one of the web applications. Okay, it can be any application, any web application. Okay, see, redbus.in. So I have some ticketing site to book bus tickets, okay, or the train tickets as well. So now it has the same thing: source, from, destination, and date, right? Now let's right click on this, click on inspect, go to the inspect viewer, where you would be able to see your DOM. This is called DOM, right? What is this called? The one which I am scrolling up and down. Able to see it? Able to follow this? Able to follow this?
Yes.
What is this? This is
Document object model.
DOM.
correct. Document object model, DOM. We call it as DOM. You can see here it has all the tags. It's HTML file which has all the tags, right? Let's say this is my element, right? From, if I inspect it, you can see here. So if I traverse onto this, so if I am moving ahead, you see it is being highlighted. I'm at this div, the entire div is getting highlighted on the UI. Are you able to feel it? Yes? No? Able to sense it, right?
Yes, sir.
See, when I come to this input tag, so it is highlighting the text field for me. The field which is need to be filled for the source, right? So that's a input field. Let's see this one, 2. 2 also would be a edit box or the input field, right? See here, it's again a input field, right? Getting highlighted when I hover onto this DOM element, so it is getting highlighted. So what are these? These are all nothing but tags, HTML tags. So if we have a bit of idea on how this HTML works, right, you would be able to, correlate this. Okay. Otherwise, also nothing to worry. We would anyway try to understand this, streamline this, and then move ahead for our test automation. Okay. No need to worry about that one. Okay. Clear on this part? So now, if you see here date, so date again. So where is the date? Let me see that. If I inspect, see here, it says span. Tag is a span here, which is again under div, right? Div tag. So likewise, each and every element, when you see this image, even image is an element for us. Image is an element for us. See here, and each of these HTML tags or the elements that we have, in the DOM, they all also come up with certain properties. If you see here, styles. So these are all CSS styling, right? What is CSS?
Element.
Cascade. What is that? CSS. Why
Cascading
they use?
style.
Right. Why they use it? They use these styles in order to design the form, right? So the look and feel, whichever you see here, right? These are all because they have embedded this image or all these elements. Along with that, they have come up with some styling as well for each of these. So image has this kind of styling. If I say here, it's not middle rather than top. See, something changed. Maybe in the image you may not be able to see it. Let me go to from. Uh, okay, here. Mm, Let me change this. Okay, I would say. Did it change? From and to. See here, their color got changed, right? To some other color which I have mentioned here. Are you able to sense it? Maybe not. Let me do some other color. See, if you see this from and to, the color of both of them got changed, right? But these kind of changes which I am doing at the browser level rests at the browser only. When I reload it, it will lose its editing. See, again it came back to the original colors from and to both. Clear on this part? So we have the elements, right? And because it is a web page and we deal with the web application, we call them as web elements. Okay. Now what Selenium does, Selenium WebDriver component, it interacts with these web elements. It has the ability to interact with these web elements. Clear on this part? We would see again what web elements we have, how many web elements we have, right? We would see each and everything. And for each of the web element, there is definitely an action associated to it, right? If it is an edit box, what is the action associated to it? Okay, maybe let's go with button. So what is the action that you do with the button? Let's say search buses. See, this is a button, right? This is the button. Now, what is the action that you do with the button?
Click.
Correct. You click on it. So it's knowingly or unknowingly for certain elements, certain actions that you does already, right? Those might be the methods in the Selenium. Clear on it? Those could be the methods in the Selenium as well, which you would be using it. It is just about you how you would learn those and identify all the methods, and also remember that each of these methods, the prominent methods that we use, which are inbuilt within the Selenium package, so how to use them. And for every language you have a syntax, right? So even for C Sharp, Java, for every language you have a certain syntax that you need to follow, even for English as well. So if I need to frame a English word, valid English word according to the grammar, so how it is? I need to frame with a subject, verb, and then a predicate, right? Then only they would call it as a sentence, correct? In the similar fashion, so every language has its own syntax. So we would go through all those syntax and then try to understand how we can automate and interact with the web application, and best possible ways to interact with it, right? It doesn't rest with just about interacting with the application. We doesn't call that as the automation, right? Or record and playback. You record something and then again play that. So it doesn't make sense, right? Clear on this part? So now let's get back to the Selenium. Okay. So let me show you the Selenium part. So what happened? So this is how the evaluation was. So wherein we had Selenium core, and then it got evaluation to WebDriver, and we would see what that WebDriver is. And from WebDriver, it again came into Selenium 2.0 and Selenium 3.0. So we would see what this Selenium 2.0 or 3.0, how those came up, right? In further. So as I said, Selenium is a component. It's a suite of components. So what are those? You can see here. What are those? So you have Selenium IDE. So you have Selenium IDE. Oh my goodness. So yeah. So you have Selenium IDE, right? The initial version, the very start, the Selenium core, it is nothing but your IDE, the add-in that we used for Firefox. So it is only supported for Firefox. So initial automation used to be worked upon Firefox. Clear on this part? So people used to have Firefox to test the web application. They used to download the Selenium ID. Now it is nowhere in place. It's just for our reference to the history and to understand what components Selenium has got. Okay. So within that IDE. So what is this IDE? Even now we use the IDEs, right? Integrated development environment, right? So what are those? Visual Studio, Eclipse. Have you heard about these tools?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So these help us for the development, right, of our scripts. So we use these IDEs or Visual Studio, VS Code, right? So all these are the IDEs which facilitate us in order to develop certain scripts or code, be it a developer or be it a automation tester. So now they have come up with certain Selenium IDE, so which supports only for Firefox, and it is a plugin. So plug and play. I shown you that extension, right? In the similar way, people can download this and then add it as an extension in the Firefox browser, and this IDE automatically gets loaded into the Firefox. Okay, no other browsers were supported initially. Clear on this part? And then came Selenium RC. What is this RC means? Anyone have any
Remote
idea?
control server. Remote control server.
Remote control.
Yes, correct. So what it used to do? It's remote control, correct. So let's say in general, TV remote control. What you do? You have a TV in your house, television in your house, and you have a remote control for it. So what you do? You can control your television, right? You can watch what channel you want, or you can increase the volume, whatever features that a television has. So you can interact with them, correct? So in the similar way, Selenium RC is nothing but Selenium remote control. What is this? This is Selenium remote control. So what it does, it's a tool for automating the web browsers. Tool for automating the web browsers. So it also what is that? Helps you to write your tests in various programming languages. So the Selenium RC started helping us with writing the automated tests, right? It started helping us with writing the automated tests. for the web applications, and it's very portable. Okay, it is portable. But within this Selenium RC, it has two components. What are those? So if I say this is entirely a Selenium RC, so within this Selenium RC, you have Selenium server. So what is this server? This server is a Java based server. Clear on this? They initially came up with a Java based server, Selenium server. Okay. And yesterday we have discussed about this client server architecture, right? Wherein when we were discussing about the APIs. So you would have a UI, you have a server, you have some API, and that API would send the request, get the response back, right? This is how UI and the other component, I mean the server, would interact. In the similar way, here as well, there are two components. One is the Selenium server, and the other one is client libraries, right? So now what we need to do, so from our side, we need to download these libraries, we need to install these client libraries. These client libraries can be in any of the languages, be it Java, Python, C Sharp, or Ruby, any language. Okay. So whichever language that you choose to develop your automation scripts, that particular client library you have to download, right? Only then it allows you to write the test scripts. A bit tightly coupled, I say, right? So it has some server, a definite server that you need to download. I mean, you need to establish, and then you have a client libraries, and again those client libraries would support for various languages. So each language has got its own library, and based upon the language that you select, you have to install that specific client library locally. So now the interaction would be between this client setup and the server, right? So it supports for multiple browsers. It supports for multiple browsers. So it supports Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera, right? So browser simulation or the browser interactions were much easier, right? Such as click, somebody said for buttons we click, right? Such as clicking, or for if you need to type something or you need to add some values to the edit box or the text box, right? So you would type from the keyboard. So such kind of browser simulations or the interactions are something which the Selenium RC supports well, right? Even the cross browser testing as well. It supports cross browser testing as well. But over a period of time, so what we felt is, though Selenium RC supports, provides these many advantages, right? It also has come up with its own disadvantages or the challenges. Rather than I say disadvantage, it has come up with its own challenges. What is that? We have to already we have to know which client library we need to install, right? So we need to set up a server. So in order to set this entire Selenium RC itself, the installation process is a headache, big headache, right? It's a long, almost, it takes longer durations. Clear on this part? First thing is that one. And then uh, it is not that much scalable when it comes with such kind of setup. So wherein for multiple people to work on your automation test scripts development or test execution, if you want some multiple uh, people to work on, it is difficult to handle that, right? So, and there are many other challenges as well. One more thing is about the slow time for execution. So first it has to load this library or the methods that are there within this library, and then it has to interact with this, like just like the request and response, right? It's an API through the um, APIs, right? So wherein, so this interaction, whichever is being done, and again coming back to the browser, this Selenium would respond for the command that we provide, and server has to again invoke the browser, right? Open the what I say, like web application, and then it has to make the interaction. So by the time it interacts, it's very slow in execution. So maybe the test or execution, somewhere you have replaced it with the automation, but it is not that effective, right? It is not saving much efforts for us, correct? So because of its slow execution, so that's where they came up with Selenium WebDriver, and this is the one which has the, the overcome these challenges, like the slow execution time, and then the no direct browser interactions, right? And this installation of the client libraries and other stuff, setting up the Selenium server, we no need to do them. See, there is no need of a separate server itself, right? And it always comes with a package which has various methods in it or the commands in it, and it is bit faster and compared to Selenium RC, right? And it also holds a direct communication with the browser, right? So that's where people started omitting these two. So we do not have Selenium IDE, we do not have Selenium RC. Now we rest with Selenium WebDriver, right? And there is one more component called Selenium Grid. It is similar to the Selenium RC architecture, like Selenium server, and we trigger our execution onto the server, and server would interact with the browsers, right? So it's the similar stuff, okay? But wherein here in the RC, your client libraries and your Selenium server, everything less local, right? Rests local, and your execution takes place on your local machine, correct? But when it comes to the grid, grid is where you have the architecture in such a way that you can achieve parallel execution of the tests. So in further classes, we would also see how to set up this Selenium grid, how to achieve this parallel test execution, and as well as cross browser and multi browser execution, right? So if at all there are any such kind of requirements, like your application should be open at a time on multiple browsers, and you want to evaluate how the application behaves, right? You would be able to do it by using Selenium grid, right? And again, this is not something locally you need to maintain, right? Selenium RC is something at local, but Selenium grid, wherein it uses again the client server mechanism, wherein your server can be configured or tied with various multiple client machines, onto which you can segregate your test execution as well. Let's say like you have 100 test cases, so your machine which connects to this server, so let's say you have connected three different machines to the server in the RC, that is in the grid. So within the grid, so you can set that test execution as, I mean, plan as well. Like let's say you have 30 test cases and you execute 15 here, 10 here, 5 here. You can set that, and accordingly, based upon the configurations that we set up, so the tests would start executing parallelly within these client machines. right? So this is something which comes up with Selenium Grid. So we would also have a separate session on this, on how to set up a Selenium Grid and how to execute test scripts in parallel, right? We would see that. We would have a demo on it. Okay. So that's how it is. So what is this Selenium IDE? It's an extension, as I told you. So it is an extension that is available for both Firefox and Chrome. And then RC is the server based, and it acts as a middleman between the user and the browser, right? We discussed about that architecture here. So once you invoke your request or your commands from the client library, it interacts with the Selenium server, and then Selenium server would interact with the browser, right, to open the application and interact with the elements. So this is bit slower in execution, right? And then we have WebDriver, most commonly used component. So, and it works on JSON wire protocol. It works on JSON wire protocol to communicate, right? And we have Grid. So as we talked about it, so Grid allows users to run tests on different machines. As I told you, those client machines, I have drawn it now, some 3 machines here, which connect to the Grid server. So if in such a fashion, when you connect them, so you would be able to configure on how many tests need to be executed in parallel across these machines, right? So it helps the users to run the tests on different machines with different browsers and possibility for different OS as well. Okay. So maybe my machine works on Windows, some other person's machine might work on Apple, right? Linux or some other OS, but totally fine. You would be able to connect to the servers and then invoke the execution, right? So that's with the Selenium Grid, right? Clear on this part?
Yes,
So
sir.
now you can see here what are the things that we have talked about Selenium, why it is more prominent. It's an open source tool and it is used for web-based automated testing. It works for multiple OS. As I told you, we can connect any number of machines uh, based upon the configurations that we have, server configurations and other stuff. But it could be multiple OS. Selenium can be run on a Linux machine, Selenium can be run on a Windows machine, Selenium can run on any other OS as well, right? So multiple OS it supports and multiple frameworks. So we have various frameworks, right? The open source community has come up with various frameworks. So one of the prominent framework for C# Selenium is NUnit, and then with Cucumber, that's SpecFlow, right? For BDD. So we have other approaches as well, like TDD, test driven development, BDD, behavior driven development. So we would discuss about them. What are those? And then how we come up with those kind of frameworks, right? So we would discuss about it. And then it also supports multiple languages. We have talked about it. It supports C Sharp, it supports Java, it supports Python, it supports Ruby, JavaScript, right? Multiple languages. That's why it is more prominent in the market. Clear on this part?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So this is something about the Selenium, and you can even see here in the figure like what kind of web browsers it supports, what kind of programming languages and operating systems it supports. It supports almost all of them, right? So that's how it is. Any questions still here? So we would see this architecture, the WebDriver architecture, in the next session. Okay. So in detail about the WebDriver architecture, how it came into picture, how the Selenium 2, 3, 4 came into picture. So we would discuss about them, and we would also see the features that the WebDriver has, each and every feature that it has. Okay. And then we would start with our uh, project. like what kind of IDE we need to install and what kind of packages we need. So we would talk about those as well and start our installation setup, project setup, and then we would go with slowly with the test automation concepts with respect to Selenium and as well as the frameworks. Yeah, clear on this part?
Yes, sir.
Great. So do let me know if you have any questions. So I would
Sir, I
stop
have
here.
one question.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, so this Selenium architecture, will it
Mhm.
change according to the language binding?
No, no, it won't. See, that's where. So when we talk about the architecture, it's in the technical aspect. Let's say like you built a house. Okay.
Mhm.
Now within the house, probably you might be able to change the sofa set which you have in your um, sitting room, right? Or probably the interiors you would be able to keep changing it if you have funds, right? According to your taste, so you can keep changing them. But will you be able to change the entire house plan?
No.
May not be feasible, right? So in the similar way here as well, architecture never changes, or the way how the Selenium interacts with the browser, it never changes because it's the architecture on which it has been built, right? So once for all, they have set up certain architecture and the way how the Selenium needs to interact with the application. Now, this interaction between the Selenium and the web page is always same, right? We would see what are the features or what are the I would say rather like features locators. Okay, those are called as locators. So what locators we have which actually helps Selenium to identify the elements and then interact with them, right? In further classes we would see it. So now all those locators or all the concepts that we would learn related to the Selenium will be one and the same. If you take the Java package, or if you take the Python package, or if you take the Selenium package for C sharp, these methods would be one and the same. Okay, because that's how they were built. So all the methods, inbuilt methods, those would be same. Their purpose would be same. But the way how I mean, write the script, right? Because you have chosen C sharp, so the syntax would differ. Okay, with respect to the language that you choose, the syntax might differ, but the methods would be there. All the methods, all the actions that Selenium need to perform for the UI web applications, so those all would be one and the same. Those would be available across the languages. So that's where they came up with the WebDriver, right? Selenium WebDriver. It's a single component now. When it was RC, you had various client libraries. Okay, so each client library which we download probably I mean, it refers to or based upon the language using which we want to work on it, right? So that's how the Selenium RC used to be. But when they came to the WebDriver, so WebDriver has a single component now. It has, I mean, it is a mixture of that Selenium RC and the WebDriver, and then they came up with Selenium 2, 3, 4. So now whatever we have, the WebDriver, Selenium WebDriver, Selenium 4 or 3 or 2, these all have common setup, right? You no need to worry about the Selenium methods and the page interactions. Those all would be done in the similar fashion. It uses only that JSON wire protocol, using which it tries to invoke your browser and then interact with the application, right? Or the web elements. Clear on this part?
Yes, got it.
Yeah.
And I think in Selenium 4, it is W3C protocol, is what
Ah,
I
right. We will talk about
yeah.
them. Down the line,
Okay.
we will talk about them when we discuss about the Selenium WebDriver, right? And its
Hmm.
evolution. in the next class, we would also talk about those details.
Okay, sir.
Why they have
Thank
replaced this JSON wire with that
you. Mhm.
the other protocol as well, we will talk about it. Okay. And
Sure, sir.
then the other part is it was first developed only for scoping the web application automation, right? Even now, when you say Selenium, it's mainly focused for web application automation. So you cannot automate a mobile application, or you cannot automate your APIs using Selenium, right? Though your language might change, you can take Java, you can take Python, you can take C Sharp or Ruby or JavaScript. But when you work with Selenium, it is mainly primarily focused for UI automation. Clear on this part?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll end here. In case if you have any questions, do let me know. Okay. Otherwise, I will end the session here. Tomorrow we will talk in depth about the WebDriver and the protocols using which this evolution happened, and why they replaced again this JSON wire protocol, when they have replaced it, why and what made them to, right? So we would talk about them as well, and we would quickly start our project setup. Okay, such
Okay,
that
sir.
we can move ahead. Yeah.
Yep.
So one more request from my side is, please do reach out to the institute folks, share your mail IDs and mobile numbers, such that they can share the content to you people, not just the recordings, the content that I would share to you people, right? So everything will be taken care by the institute itself. So they
Okay, sir.
would be keep sharing the content to you people.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.